Hello everyone, welcome back to On the Fly. Today we're going to be taking a look at the top 5 rankings of the men's hockey. So when we take a look at this, we're going to take a look at what countries should be there, what countries should not be there, and really what countries have a shot at the top 5 coming in a little bit, obviously with World Championships coming to an end, the Olympics just finishing up. We're going to take a look at what countries are really the best right now in terms of the men's side. Obviously, we know with the women's side, kind of comes down to the same teams every year, but the men's side always is up for grabs. So I'm going to put my rankings out there compared to the IIHFs, and this is the IIHFs right now, with Finland in 1, Canada in 2, Russia in 3, the US in 4, Sweden in 5, with honorable mentions of Czechia and Switzerland. But really, in my opinion at least, these are not necessarily the right rankings. Obviously, Finland has taken some big advantages without Canada and the US and Russia and Sweden losing their NHL players. Finland having their own league in the Finnish Elite League have really capitalized on their opportunities with the Olympics and the recent World Championships. And they've really dominated over the last little bit, which is why their ranking is so high. But we'll jump into that a little bit later. So we're going to start with my own rankings. We'll start with the honorable mentions. So in my opinion, Czechia and Switzerland both should be in honorable mentions. They both have a shot to beat some of the top 5 teams where necessarily the other ones won't. But at the end of the day, they don't have what it takes. Czechia, they do have a pretty solid forward core, but unfortunately their defense and goaltending is where it severely lacks. Switzerland just lacking pretty much everything in terms of depth, but of course there is still room to grow. Now jumping into it right with the top 5 rankings, we're going to start off with number 5. And for me, number 5 is going to be Team Finland. So one of the many reasons why Team Finland is going to be at 5 is due to their lack of depth. When we take a look at this team, you can sort of see how they have 2 lines and they have 1 line for defense, but as soon as you get past that top 6 line and that top 6 role, you're going to see very much a lack of players. So when you take a look at the 3rd and 4th line, not necessarily high-end players, more that grinder type role, similar to their defense, just sort of that lack of player. You don't have some of the bigger players and some of the better guys that some of these other teams like Canada, the US, Russia, and Sweden all have. And that's sort of where they lack, right? You have top 2 lines, you have a top line for the defense, and you have pretty solid goaltending. So that's one of the big pluses for Team Finland. But at the end of the day, you have to look at it from a whole perspective. And unfortunately, Saros cannot compete with, say, a Vasilevsky when their defense is not there. And their goal scoring ability isn't as good as some of the other teams. So for that reason, when we take a look especially at the other sides, that is why Team Finland is going to be at number 5. So now coming in at number 4, we have Team Sweden, and once again, for many reasons, Sweden is ahead of Finland. Take a look at that depth role, as I was just mentioning. There is quite a bit different when you take a look at that defensive side. You have basically 3 lines of defense for Team Sweden, holding up with their reputation as one of the best defensive countries in the world. Unfortunately, the reason why they are not number 1, 2, or 3 is due to their lack of depth on the offensive side. So when we take a look at that, obviously Rickard Rakell, William Karlsson, and Andreas Johnsson aren't going to be putting up with the likes of Connor McDavid, Nathan McKinnon. You can't really make that argument very well. So for that reason, that's one of the biggest reasons, at least, why Sweden is not higher on this list. And their goaltending, pretty decent. Markstrom and Lehner, nothing too crazy there. I mean, they're going to keep them in it. They're not necessarily going to steal the show like some of the other goalies will. But at the end of the day, you need a goaltender that's going to be there and play every day. And in my opinion, Markstrom and Lehner are both very solid options for that role. And for that reason, I'm going to stick Sweden at number 4. So moving on to number 3, we have the Team US of A. And for many reasons, once again, one of the big ones is that they have 4 lines of offensive players, 3 lines of defensive players, and 2 very solid goalies. And even with the likes of Matthews, Eichel, and Kane on that top line, full-on firepower, going to be very difficult to defend for a lot of teams. And you got pretty much that shutdown role with Slavin and McAvoy on the top line. Players that have played together with Werenski and Jones on the second line for the defense, and then a very interesting combination with Hughes and Carlson, very offensive-minded defensemen, and Hellebuck coming in as their goaltender. I think that's going to be a very solid choice. And the reason why they're not higher on this list, their bottom 6 forwards aren't going to compete with some of the other teams like Russia or Canada. And obviously, as I just mentioned, there's 2 teams left, so we may as well move on to number 2. And for me, that number 2 is going to be Russia. So when we take a look at a team like Russia, obviously they aren't necessarily going to blow your socks off. But when you take a look at that offensive side, very difficult to defend. 2 of the top goal scorers in the NHL with Ovechkin and Kucherov, and you can't also forget about Tarasenko, Panarin, and Malkin, who's going to set up a lot of those goals. And I'm looking very much forward to seeing if, once again, they do host a World Cup tournament, whether or not these players are going to be playing together. One of the main things I'd also look at is the role of Andrei Vasilevsky, one of the best goaltenders in the league, in Bobrovsky coming in as his backup. Very tough team to try and score on. And you can sort of get bailed out by the defense. Nothing too crazy there. Sergachev, Provorov, that top pair are going to be very solid, especially being backed by Vasilevsky. But overall, I think just because of the goaltending and the offensive firepower, with the depth scoring that they actually do have, there's a reason why Russia's going to come in at number 2 and not necessarily above the US or Sweden. But with that, there is one country left, and that is going to be Team Canada coming in at number 1. And once again, for many reasons why Canada is number 1. You have pretty much the 3 best players in the world on that one team. McDavid, McKinnon, Crosby. You also can't forget about Marchand, who's going to be that pest playing alongside Bergeron and Crosby, 2 of the best playmakers in the world. And that really is sort of solidifies that top 6. Take a look at the bottom 6, even better. You have Tavares and Marner playing together, Point and Stamkos playing together. So when you take a look at the team, they have a lot of players that already have that pre-made chemistry. And in tournaments where you don't get that much time to prepare, that is one of the big reasons why Canada is so much better than a lot of the other countries in the world. Take a look at the top defense at least. You have Makar, one of the best defensemen in the league. Theodore Pietrangelo, number 1st unit. Doughty, Letang, very solid 2nd. And then sort of that newcomer line in Chabot and Makar. Not a lot of overall playing time together, but at the same time, 2 very solid defensemen. And once again, sort of the lack of goaltending is sort of a concern, but you also have Yari and Kemper, who are very 2 solid goaltenders in net. And when you have the defense that Canada does have, that's not going to be too much of a concern, especially when you take a look at an international tournament. So there you have it. We have the top 5 and the honorable mentions. So when you take a look at this, obviously there is quite room to debate. You could obviously debate, well, Vasilevsky isn't as good as they say they are. He's just good because Tampa has a lot of good defense. So you might say US is better. But in my opinion, I think Vasilevsky makes the team. And that's sort of why Russia's so much higher. Canada coming in at number 1, maybe a little biased. Let me know in the comments below if you disagree. But at the end of the day, I think Canada's number 1 for a good reason. And especially when you have those top players playing together, it is very tough to defend. 2 of the fastest players in the world, McKinnon, McDavid, and Barzal, all on the same line, is going to create a lot of chaos for a Canadian front that really is just impenetrable at this point. And really, if you take a look at Canada's game, they're going to score a lot of goals. They're not going to let goals let in. But with that, once again, Canada coming in number 1. And really, the rest of them just follow like dominoes in order. And when you take a look at Finland's recent success, a lot of it is because Canada did not have anybody to send to fight against them. The US was basically just a washed-up team from a whole bunch of college guys. And that's sort of where you can see that line being drawn. You have professional players, pre-NHLers, post-NHLers, playing against college guys, and you can see the gap that there really is, especially in the years that they have been playing for, right? Other than that, Sweden, I think Sweden is going to benefit a lot. Finland's the one team that's benefited greatly from the loss of NHL players. Sweden's done quite well as well. Russia absolutely loves it when there's no NHL players because they do have their own and probably one of the best leagues in the world in the KHL. That's why they always do well in non-NHL Olympic years, just because they have the players. Even look at back in the Soviet Union era, that is one of the reasons why they did so much better than all the other teams, is just because there was no competition. And even when they did come over, they would beat the NHLers quite often. So with that, that's my top 5 list. Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. But with that, if you made it this far in the video, thanks for watching. If you'd like to drop a like, if you really liked it, consider subscribing, tell all your friends, and be on the lookout for more coming very soon. Until next time, see ya.